You are listening to AP Taylor Swift, the podcast for Swifties who are all about the lyrics. We're your hosts. I'm Jen.
I'm Monty.
And I'm Jody.
And we are your unofficial professors of Taylor Swift. Hello, and welcome to another episode of AP Taylor Swift. This week we are so excited to dive into a very literary theme that is very aligned with everything we know of Taylor, who she is, literally, which we'll get to, and who she loves and what she loves to talk about. This week we are doing Emily Dickinson, so we have each come prepared with a song that we are going to connect to one of Ms. Dickinson's poems. Monty, do you want to give us some background on Emily Dickinson?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to first start with a preface, and that is none of us out of the three of us are specialized in any way in Emily Dickinson's work specifically. So actually, in some ways, this is going to be a really fun conversation for us because we wanted to push ourselves a little and talk about a topic that I think all of us are interested in learning more about and just see how it relates to Taylor. But we all did our own research, as we always do. And I just wanted to throw that out there in case you're listening and you do happen to specialize in Dickinson. That's just not where we're coming from. We're coming at this with
then we're very sorry.
Curious lens. But we would probably love to hear from you if you have more of an insight.
Please.
So let us know. But yeah, Emily Dickinson is a very famous poet. Most of you hopefully are familiar with her name, even if not her work. Her dates are, as we always say in the academic community, December 10th, 1830 to May 15th, 1886. So puts her squarely in the 19th century when a lot was happening. In many ways, it can be considered the American Renaissance period. And she was an American poet. And she was based out of Amherst, Massachusetts, where she was born. And she was born to a pretty prominent family. I think all of this is some important context because when you just think about the kind of poems that she writes, she's known for darker themes, very succinct, sometimes very, I don't want to say morbid, but she definitely has these poems that are a little bit
melancholic,
absolutely. Just
hopeless,
not chipper, the opposite of cheerful. And you have to dark is a great word. I see Jen and I both wore our black today.
Just gonna say
we're really getting into this method dressing. But knowing that she was from a prominent family, I think the fact that she wrote such dark themes kind of opens up this line of questioning into why did she feel this isolation, and she was kind of a homebody and lived alone. Just kind of cut off from the community in many ways. She did have a large number of poems, almost 1,800 poems that she wrote, most of which were discovered after her death. They were discovered rolled up in her room, I believe. And she just had this massive, massive body of work. She also we've learned a little bit about her private life, and we learned that she had a relationship with her brother's wife. And so there was definitely just being in a same-sex relationship that was forbidden, definitely in the time, especially from a prominent family. You can imagine where there was a lot of pressure and taboo around what she could and couldn't do, perhaps. Maybe that's where a lot of the isolation and the themes come from, the darker themes in her poems come from. So there's a few interesting things about her life that just make her an incredibly fascinating poet to study, just in addition to the huge, massive number of, which I think is just startling in itself and important and significant because a lot of times we don't have that much work, especially from female writers, that we can even reference or study. So that is just the fact that we have so many poems is a really remarkable thing.
And not only her poems, we have a lot of her letters. So that's also how, again, because she became famous posthumously and most of her poetry was published after her death, a lot of what we know about her and her life comes through her letters, either her writing or the correspondence that she received. And the Emily Dickinson Museum catalogs a lot of her writing, has a great biography. So we'll put the link to that resource in the show notes as well. That gives us some context for her poetry and her poems. But again, this was all, she became famous posthumously. This poetry, most of it, I think only like 6 or 7 pieces were published during her lifetime. And some of these poems come from the letters themselves. They weren't, written specifically for a book of poetry. They were written among her correspondence and pulled from those resources.
Yeah, online on Wikipedia, our trusty source, it says only 1 letter and 10 of her nearly 1,800 poems were published during her lifetime, which is crazy. And how does this relate to our mother, Taylor Swift.
I mean, I've been playing Connections a lot lately, and I don't know who the fourth person would be, but I feel like we could put Emily Dickinson, Taylor Swift, Alexander Hamilton, and some fourth person under the category of just terrifyingly prolific writers and creators.
Yes.
Shakespeare,
our favorite. Taylor Swift is just seen as a prolific writer of our times, and Emily Dickinson was very similar in hers. Her writing style, Taylor Swift's writing style, has also been compared to Emily Dickinson's style. Emily Dickinson was known for writing using a slant rhyme and unconventional capitalization. Taylor Swift would leave us clues through capitalization back in the early days. But also, I think you'll hear about this when we discuss some of our poems, at least in my song and poem that I bring to today's discussion. You may notice there's just similarities in how they sound. Short lines, the way that the rhyming scheme is, the way that the structure is. There are a lot of similarities in just how their words sound. We do know that Taylor Swift likes Emily Dickinson a lot. One of her songs has direct references to things that Dickinson writes. I think some of us may also touch on those. And then, apparently, according to Ancestry.com, the two are actually related.
Yeah, they're basically cousins.
Yeah, and because we just discuss an American poet, Taylor Swift, every day, why not check in with another American poet, Emily Dickinson?
I will kick us off. I have the first song, so I will be comparing They Put Us Far Apart by Emily Dickinson, which I believe is poem 474, to Message in a Bottle, which is a From the Vault song from the album Red, Taylor's version. It was written by Johann Schuster, Martin Sandberg, and Taylor Swift. And it came out in 2021, obviously on Red, Taylor's version. So there's two things I want to compare with this. I'll start with the first one. We can chat about it, go to the second one. But at a high level, the poem itself is definitely about some sort of forced separation. So that theme is the one I immediately, as I was reading through some of the poems and just thinking about it, this idea of being forced apart was something I stumbled on here and immediately thought of Message in a Bottle. So in the opening stanza from They Put Us Far Apart, it goes, well, and I should maybe mention, so for Emily Dickinson, because most of her poems were published posthumously, most of the titles are just the first line of the poem. So if you're new to Emily Dickinson and we say the title of the poem and then we read the poem, the first line is going to be the title. That's why they're also numbered. So just an FYI. That was something I did not know. They put us far apart, as separate as sea, and her unsung peninsula, we signified these sea. She has a lot of wordplay, which again is very Taylor-esque, but this idea of they put us far apart as separate as the sea really captured me immediately with this poem, because I thought of Message in a Bottle. The idea of a message in a bottle, of course, is both of these things are figurative, both metaphors for the separation, being across the sea, being away from one another. And a message in a bottle is something that you put in the ocean and you hope it gets to the right person. So then we have lines in Message in a Bottle. Message in a bottle is all I can do, standing here hoping it gets to you. So this idea of we're separated, it's a forced separation. In the poem, they put us far apart. So someone put them far apart. And you just kind of get it in general from the song Message in a Bottle of like, it doesn't feel like it's the most active choice from our protagonist in the song. Maybe the other person left. I think there's some differences in the scenario, but the separation is definitely there. It's definitely not what the speakers want to be happening, and they're trying to find a way to communicate across this chasm. There's also the lines in the poem. Some of this poem is very difficult to get into. So just for the record, with any Emily Dickinson poem, we could spend hours on the poem itself. People write like dissertations on just like a couple of poems. We're not doing that. But they, again, talking about dark, talking about very intense. We're about to get into it. They summoned us to die with sweet alacrity. We stood upon our stapled feet, condemned, but just to see. So again, this idea of just like standing here hoping it gets to you, and from Message in a Bottle to we stood upon our stapled feet, being kind of rooted to the spot, forced to be there, but they don't want to be separated. So that was like kind of the core initial connection I made between this song and this poem. And this song is interesting. This is a longer conversation at a different point if we ever deep dive this. The song is very upbeat and like boppy, but then you listen to the lyrics and it's like very sad.
Yeah, it's depressing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I have all these things to say to you, and I hope it gets to you, and I'm just putting them in it's a message in a bottle. Like, I'm not even telling them to you directly. I just, like, hope it gets to you.
Yeah, there's something so hopeful and hopeless with a message in a bottle, which is why I connected it to this poem immediately. Like, you have no control over it. You just put it out there and you're hoping it works. Like, there's such a lack of control in this poem and in this song of what's happening.
And yet the song, because of the music, sounds so upbeat and hopeful and optimistic, I guess. Whereas the poem definitely is more subdued and dark and more what you would expect it to be from the lyrics. And so I love the connection because there are these really clear parallels that you just talked about. But when I first saw that you were going to do the song, I was like, oh, I cannot wait to see. This is like not what I would think of with an Emily Dickinson topic at all. But it actually does work so well.
Yeah, because even in the song, we get darker stuff of these days I'm restless. Work days are endless. Look how you've made me. But time moves faster. Replaying your laughter. Disaster. Like, that's like happiness in the past, but it's not painting a pleasant picture of the present, of being thinking about this person's laughter, and it's a disaster to think about it. The thing that I think is potentially a difference, and this is where we can get into maybe more of a debate about it, the love and the connection is definitely strong in both. I think, to me, so in Emily Dickinson's poem, we have the lines, "They took away our eyes, they thwarted us with guns. I see thee," each responded straight through telegraphic signs. So, high-level summary of that, to me, the way I interpret that is, like, they made it so we couldn't see each other. There was absolutely this forced separation, but yet, through the telegraphic signs, they communicated to one another, no, I still see you. So kind of this, like, no matter what happened, their connection is strong enough to outweigh this. Great. I don't know if the connection is that strong in Message in a Bottle. I think that the protagonist, that the speaker, feels that connection. Let me rephrase that. It's not that I don't know if the connection is that strong. I don't know if the connection is that mutual. I think Message in a Bottle can be interpreted as more of a one way of the other person's gone. It's like, how is it in London? I'm just sitting here hoping you kind of come back. So, like, did the person choose to leave, or were they forced to be separated for other reasons? I think that's more up in the air because, like, the things I just said, replaying your laughter, disaster, that's all in this person's head. We don't totally have, like, there's no us, there's no they, there's no two sides of this. However, it's still very intense because we also have lines of, like, you could be the one that I keep, and I could be the reason you can't sleep at night. I interpret it as the Emily Dickinson poem is, we have this incredibly strong connection that people are trying to destroy, and they can't destroy it, and we know that. And I think Message in a Bottle is, we have the potential for an incredibly strong connection, but because of this forced separation, we're not going to be able to see it through unless something changes there. So I think that there's maybe some difference in that outcome, or kind of the scenario around the song in the poem, but the messages in these two texts are definitely, there's forced separation. I don't want that. I, the speaker, don't want that to happen. This sucks, kind of thing.
And the medium that would potentially connect them is the ocean.
Yes.
I agree. I do think that in the song, there's a really big, the key word to me is could. You could be the one that I love. Yes. You could be the one. Whereas in the poem, it feels a little bit more sure and concrete. But I think the parallel is definitely there, that two people are far apart and separated potentially as the sea, by the sea.
Honorable mention to this poem, I would say I seriously considered it, but we just did it recently, so not that much. But I also thought about Guilty as Sin because she uses a lot of, I think across her poem, she uses a lot of religious metaphors, but she also has lines in here. One stanza is permission to recant, permission to forget. We turned our backs upon the sun for perjury of that. So saying, like, we had permission to say, like, oh, no, this wasn't real, but, like, we're not going to do that. But the idea of recanting is a very religious thing, as well as we stood upon our stapled feet is, like, you're rooted to that spot, but also can be a reference to the crucifixion. And so I kind of considered it. I think it's kind of there as well, this religious, and Guilty as Sin is also a wanting someone you're not able to have in that moment. So I think that there are more comparisons there as well. So just wanted to honorable mention that. I think the religious element of the poem is really strong, It's just the one part that didn't really connect with Message in a Bottle. So
before you wrap up, I'm really curious about your process for choosing this song and this poem. Did you start by reading the poems, or did you have a song or an album in mind first?
That's a good question.
Because I'm going to tell you my process as I go to my song. So that's why I'm very curious for each of us how we did this.
I think, man, I don't even remember how I did it. I think I kind of had the song first. I've been wanting to do Message in a Bottle for a while. I think it's an underrated song. It's kind of a deep cut that I was listening to, and I was like, this is more of a bop. It's a bop. People don't give it enough credit. But I also think it's a really powerful metaphor that I've always really liked. Mm-hmm. And like, I didn't want to force anything, but as soon as we said Emily Dickinson, I was like, I know she has stuff about separation. Yeah. And I was like, let's just see. And I think I just did something about like separation, and immediately they put us far apart, as separate as seen. I was like, great, Message in a Bottle. Like,
love it.
Let's see if this actually works. And it did. I think it's worked incredibly well. But it was like, she has to have a metaphor about that separation in the same way that Message in a Bottle does.
I'm going to ask you the same question, Monse, when we get to your song. So just be prepared.
I'm ready.
All right. Yeah. Well, you've got some time because I have the next song. And I'll tell you a little bit about my process first that got me to the song. Started by picking up my Emily Dickinson selected poems from high school, notated, I'm that dork. Was reading her poetry and was thinking like, oh, maybe something will come to me, and it didn't. And then I was like, okay, well, I need to understand Emily Dickinson a bit more. So I started reading about her life and her biography, and the isolation immediately is what struck out at me, that most of her poetry was written in isolation. She was a bit of a recluse, and I thought Reputation. Immediately, I was like, oh, there's got to be something in Reputation. And then I went and listened to Reputation, and I really couldn't find anything except the interwebs talk about New Year's Day, because she says Forevermore in New Year's Day. And so they're like, oh, that's an Emily Dickinson reference. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe if I spent more time, I could have like really found and read more of her poetry. I could have found a Reputation song. But the idea of writing in isolation and separating yourself from the world, I thought was very interesting. Interesting parallel between the two. So yeah, I struck out on Reputation. And then the other feelings I got from her poetry and from her biography was obviously of, a little bit more of like the romantics, woodsy nature vibes. And of course, that leads to Evermore. The internet also loves an Evermore Emily Dickinson comparison. I am quoting from the book Taylor Swift by the Book. She announced Evermore's release on the poet's birthday and described her quill pen genre as sounding, quote, like a letter written by Emily Dickinson's great-grandmother while sewing a lace curtain.
Kind of amazing.
Right. So I decided to compare the song Evermore, which is track 15 off of the album Evermore, came out in 2020, written by Taylor Swift, William Bowery, and Justin Vernon. And I went off of vibes. I compared it to poem 355, It Was Not Death, for I Stood Up. The internet will tell you to compare this song to Sue Forevermore, which is about her sister-in-law, Sue, that she was in love with, simply because of the line, Sue Forevermore. It wasn't enough for me. I wanted to see like a deeper parallel in the themes of the song and the poem. And so that's why I compared this to this poem, It Was Not Death, for I Stood Up, because there's a lot of, as you said, Monse, in your introduction, the themes of hopelessness, despair, loneliness really come through in the song Evermore. This Evermore, the song, and I'm going to have to keep saying Evermore, the song, has just profound longing for a love, for a lost love. There's cold and darkness, and I see a lot of the same in this poem. And then there was a lot of kind of direct parallels lyrically and literarily. So I'll read a couple of stanzas or parts of stanzas. So we have, It was not death, for I stood up, and all the dead lie down. It was not night, for all the bells put out their tongues for noon. In the chorus, we have catching my breath, catching my death. So you have that death imagery, except that in the poem, it was not death. She knows what something is because of what it is not. It was not death, for I stood up. Similarly, in the second stanza, it was not frost, for on my flesh I felt Sirocco's crawl, nor fire, for just my marble feet could keep a chancel cool. We've got some frost parallels, whether be the frost.
Yeah, and frost is not like a super common term that you just use.
Not at all.
That's pretty cool.
Right? Weather be the frost. We also have Hey December. We also have barefoot in the wildest winter, right? So we have thematically similar feelings in this song. There's just these little moments throughout the poem and throughout the song where there are these lyrical parallel. Again, this in another stanza, and could not breathe without a key, and 'twas like midnight some. And then in the song we have, was catching my breath, staring at an open window, catching my death, right? So we've got breath, we've got death, we've got frost, we've got
basically the same.
Basically the same. But really, for me, it was the vibes. And I went off of vibes.
Can't believe you were
I'm
the
using
vibes
the vibes
one today.
I was the vibes one. Poetry Foundation has an article on this specific poem, and they also talk a lot. This poem, is written in ballad meter 4/3/4/3, which they describe is like Emily's double time meter. And in this song, the bridge is where we get a little, I don't know if it's quite double time, but it speeds up. This song is very slow and much like a ballad. And then the bridge picks up the pace. I found it very interesting that they talked about the rhythm of this poem as Emily's double time meter. So going back to the Poetry Foundation has an article on this poem, and they say, if despair was a song, wouldn't it sound like this? Clipped, repetitive, taut, as imperative as church music, as regular as a ballad's refrain. And I felt like the song Evermore kind of felt like the song version of this poem. As much as this poem kind of reads a bit melodic like a song, here we have a song that feels like a cousin, if you will, to the poem, just like Taylor is apparently sixth cousin of Emily Dickinson's.
It's not a cousin. Like, why? Okay. I don't understand how cousins
genetics
work.
are weird. I don't tell you.
Adopted.
I do think that there is something there to the point that Taylor Swift is sometimes considered to write similarly to Emily Dickinson. I do think, like, when you just look at this poem and then you just look at the song and, like, the way it's written, this is going to be the case with the song that I picked as well. If you didn't have the music to it and you're just looking at the words, they do kind of, they look similar. They're written kind of similarly. And I had this urge the whole time to try to sing her poem, to like pick a Taylor Swift song and try to sing it that way. And you could kind of see it going that way just because of the way the rhymes are and the way that the lines are written. So I could totally see that. And then, I do think it's interesting that some of the words and lyrics that Taylor uses in her songs, like in this one that you picked, they're just similar words. She's using the same language that Emily Dickinson used. The fact that we can see those kind of parallels is pretty cool. I think with Evermore, especially with the announcement being on was it her birthday or her death day? Her birthday. That's like, it feels like this was something that was just top of mind probably as she was writing this album as a whole. So it makes a lot of sense to me that she would be using that language in this song or trying to bring in those vibes into some of her music, because clearly that was something that was top of mind for her as she was doing this exercise.
I also think just in general, from the poem, the stanza, and yet it tasted like them all. The figures I have seen, set orderly for burial, reminded me of mine, is just one of the most like Taylor Swiftian things of like, oh, that reminded me of my funeral. I come back from the dead. I do it all the time. All those, like, that feels like that almost feels like a line you could almost hear her saying in an interview of like, oh yeah, that reminded me of my the funeral of that era.
My
like
tears ricochet.
Yeah, I was thinking of that as well.
You also have from that same stanza, I see that the figures and burial, right? Ghosts seeing visions. And in the bridge of Evermore, I'm not going to read the Justin Vernon, the Bon Iver lines. I'm just going to read the Taylor Swift lines. And when I was shipwrecked, I thought of you. In the cracks of light, I dreamed of you. It was real enough to get me through, right? Like, so she's seeing I thought of you. I dreamed of you. These visions are what kept her going. And here, that to me also paralleled this poem. The other parallel I see just to Emily Dickinson overall in this song, writing letters addressed to the fire. We know that Emily Dickinson wrote a lot of letters, and a lot of them probably were out of hopelessness. I mean, especially the letters that she was writing to Sue, someone that she could not be with. Those are essentially writing letters addressed to the fire. Like, nothing can come of these emotions. She can't act on her feelings because it was not proper. That's what I got. It's been a while since I've had to like analyze poetry, which is really funny to say because I'm like, we're basically analyzing Taylor's songs like poetry, but I've got to be in the right headspace to like analyze poetry. I look at like the annotations that I have in this book and I'm like, okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, the
Jody.
deep reading, the close readings of poetry really does take so much work. And it's kind of what we try to do in our deep dives, and just the show and tell format is obviously different. But yeah, I think that's great. I think I wanted to give an honorable mention also to Ivy, the song, which is also in the Evermore album, because it does have specific lyrics that reference some of Emily Dickinson's work. None of us picked that song, but it is in the same vein as Evermore and the whole
More
album.
Death.
Yeah, More Death. Some of the lyrics I think that are referencing Emily Dickinson directly are "My pain fits in the palm of your freezing hand, taking mine, but it's been promised to another. Spring breaks loose, but so does fear. I'd live and die for moments that we stole on begged and borrowed time. So tell me to run or dare to sit and watch what will become and drink my husband's wine." So I think it is so valid to just think that the fact that there's a song on this album where she has direct references to other quotes in Emily Dickinson's works, the fact that the whole album was announced in such a way that was an allusion to her, and then you have these songs. Evermore, the song title, is the same as the title of the album, and there's a reference to Forevermore within Emily Dickinson's work. It completely makes sense that there would be so many similarities in this kind of a track.
Can I have a 2-minute soapbox for something only tangentially related to this?
Granted.
But it needs to be said.
Go for it.
In the live action Beauty and the Beast film, you'll see where I'm going with this.
I love this.
They added a new song called Evermore, which is what the Beast sings when Belle leaves. That is a change from the song on the Broadway version. The Broadway version is the "If I Can't Love Her" or "If I Can't Have Her." I can't remember the exact title. And it was an horrendous decision, and I'm still angry about it. And I will tell you why. Because in Evermore, the song, it ends with like, "I'll wait for her forevermore." So it ends in this like, "Oh, she's gone, but I'll wait for her. I still love her." And then in the second half of the show, he almost basically like kind of commits suicide. Like he lets Gaston try to kill him, and it's only when he sees Belle and realizes she came back that he's like, "Oh, I have something to fight for." So he's actually quite hopeless in the second half of the story when he's about to let himself be killed. And in the Broadway version, "If I Can't Have Her," it's the finale. It's the last song before intermission, and the song ends with "If I can't have her, then let the world be done with me." So you leave with like, oh, he's in a really hopeless state of mind, so it makes sense, this character arc. And by removing that and adding the song Evermore, they completely ruin the character arc. It is not consistent whatsoever. And "If I Can't Love Her" is one of the best male like ballads in Broadway, in my personal opinion, and they just removed it from the movie, and I'm very upset about it. And anytime Evermore comes up, this is always in the back of my mind.
Jen has been waiting. We did this podcast, and she's been waiting a year plus, almost 2 years, for us to pick the song Evermore to get on this soapbox.
I'm literally looking up the email address of who you can write to, because honestly, this deserves to be escalated.
Bob
this is
Iger,
truly
CEO at Disney.com.
I just listened to the two songs. They're both on Spotify, and tell me which one is more consistent with the Beast storyline in the second half.
Our second podcast series is going to be Broadway.
Yeah, probably.
And Disney and Harry Potter and all millennial things.
We can move on.
It's be called Painfully Millennial.
Painfully Millennial, yeah.
It's been years. I truly am. I'm still upset.
The millennial experience as communicated through Taylor Swift songs. Isn't that what this podcast is basically?
Yes. She's also painfully millennial.
That's true.
Well, that's amazing. I have the last song. Before I get into that, I'm like, do I want to do some of my other honorable mentions? I think we've gone through all of them. There was one honorable mention that I haven't gone through that chronologically would be after my song, but I'll just go ahead and say it so I don't forget. And that is a song, "I Hate It Here," from Tortured Poets Department, is another song that has a lot of Emily Dickinson isms. And so if you are an avid fan of either Tortured Poets Department or Emily Dickinson and want to go ham on that, please let us know, because we'd love to hear about it. And maybe it'll show up in the Substack. I don't want to make any promises, but that was another honorable mention.
I had that thought with that song too, so seconded on that honorable mention.
Cool. Great. Well, then my song, the last song, is also the one that we're going to be deep diving. It is another one of those, I bet you didn't see this coming, Karma. And It is on Midnights, came out in 2022, is written by Taylor Swift. And I tied this song to probably one of Emily Dickinson's most famous poems, Hope is a Thing with Feathers. And because, Jody, you were asking a little bit about process, I will admit that I started with this poem. I love this poem. When we decided Emily Dickinson, this was one of maybe 3 poems that I know by her off the top of my head, but definitely one of my favorites. I also don't think it's as dark and depressing as her other poems, which
no,
just for me, on brand. I'm not a very dark and depressing person, and I like hopey
says
things.
the person who makes every song about death, but carry on.
Okay, I need to unpack that at a different time. But just generally like hopey feely things. And I'm like now thinking that most of this podcast has been recorded while I was either pregnant or like postpartum. So I'm like, did that have something to do with it? Maybe real Monty's coming back. I don't know.
You are generally a very hopeful person. It was just a funny thing in the context of like every song. You're like, okay, but they're all dead, by the way.
I know. You really hit me with a like, wait, I know something about you. And I'm like, wait, shit.
Oh, shit. Must go unpack that.
Okay, well, pause recording. You go journal for an hour.
Yeah,
and
let me go do some self-discovery. No, I think I'm generally a hopey feely person. Anyway, so I love this poem. And on the topic of just the numbering and the names, this poem, because it is so famous and it's one of her earlier poems maybe that was published, I think it goes by the name Hope is a Thing with Feathers very often. But of course, yes, the poems didn't have names. And something that's really interesting is that as I was looking up the number for this poem, there's a little bit of discrepancy on what the real number is. And that is because the original poems were reassessed and transcribed by Thomas Jefferson. Random fact.
AKA David Diggs.
Right. So like that mental imagery is hilarious. And yeah, I'm just now imagining like Thomas Jefferson with his quill, like transcribing Emily Dickinson poetry. Timing is so weird because I think of the 19th century and I don't know why I don't. Thomas Jefferson is just interesting. In his version, in his transcriptions for his copies, it's number 314 in his collection, but there's a Johnson collection as well, and in that collection it's number 254. So I don't know if that's consistent with a lot of the other poems, but at least for this poem there were some differences in the numbers for whatever reason. I'm going to read the poem because it is pretty short, and then we're going to talk about karma. And maybe as I'm reading, you may understand why I immediately thought of karma. Hope is a thing with feathers. Wait, I was so close. Sorry, I cut. I was about to sing this in karma. Just like,
Hope is a thing with feathers.
Is a thing with feathers. The perches in the soul sings a tune without words. It never stops at all.
Dead.
Okay, but it works. So
right. Okay,
wow.
So yeah, maybe we won't cut that. I don't know. Except you have to hear me sing. Hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. Lots to unpack there, but do you get it? Doesn't it sound totally, exactly like
yeah.
Done. Okay, can we go home? Done?
Join us next week as we deep dive karma right here on AP Taylor Swift.
Okay, so for comparison, in case you didn't get it, I am just now going to take a second to read the chorus of karma. But I'm going to start with, karma's a relaxing thought. Aren't you envious that for you it's not? Sweet like honey. Karma is a cat purring in my lap because it loves me, flexing like a goddamn acrobat. Me and karma vibe like that. And then the second version of the chorus, karma is the thunder rattling your ground. Karma's on your scent like a bounty hunter. Karma's going to track you down step by step from town to town. Sweet like justice. Karma is a queen. Karma takes all my friends to the summit. Karma is a guy on the screen coming straight home to me. I think there's been an official lyrics change there, but honestly, it's unclear.
Isn't that the bridge?
Is that the bridge? Sorry, I thought it was.
Well, it's not clear. You have that. Yeah, maybe because you have the ask me what I learned from all those years as like a pre-bridge, maybe.
Right. The tune is exactly the same as previous choruses. It's just different words. So I don't know. Maybe
unclear. Music experts, please weigh in.
Okay, so now that you've heard me read both, if it's still not clear what the similarities are, I thought that this poem sounded very similar to Karma. The poem is about hope, and it's a bunch of metaphors. Hope is a thing with feathers. Karma is the thunder. Hope is a thing that with feathers that perches in the soul. Karma is the thunder rattling your ground. There are similarities like the little bird that kept so many warm. Taylor has a cat purring in her lap.
Yeah, the nature metaphors are strong.
Nature, sea, land.
Yeah.
You've got also
storm.
that really comes across in the music video for Karma as well, the connection to nature.
I mean, sweetest in the gale is heard. Karma is a thunder again. Like, think of the thunder with gale. It ends with, it never in extremity asked a crumb of me. And Karma is the guy on the screen coming straight home to me. Like, you even have the direct connection of hope to me. She's drawing a line from what it means of hope and what it asks of her. And then you have the same thing in Karma. It's drawing a line from Karma to her. Like, how does it relate to her at the end of the day?
Taylor sings me and Karma vibe like that. And I could see Emily saying me and Hope vibe like that in her poem.
Emily is to hope as Taylor is to Karma.
Done.
Basically.
Ready to take my SAT now. Thank you so much.
I was just going to say it might be helpful for those of you taking standardized tests.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And, Hope also sings a tune without words and never stops at all. And Karma, too. Karma never sleeps. Karma never dies. It's going to hunt you down step by step from town to town. And so there's just some parallel structure in the way that these two works are written. Sounds very similar, and it has similar themes to convey the same things. One is just about hope and the other's about karma.
Karma is a very hopeful emotion. Like, when you say karma,
if you're on the right side of it.
If you're the one, you're like, karma's going to take care of. Trust me, I'm in my reputation era right now. And instead of wishing harm and hate upon the people who do me wrong, you know what? Karma. I believe in karma, that karma will take care of it. And so for me, that's like, I don't want to spend my time on the negative of like wishing hurt on someone. I'm just saying, you know what? Karma. It's just going to take care of it.
I think, if we go to the origins of Karma, this is also a song that I have wanted to do for a really long time because I grew up very much believing in karma, and it's kind of one of the cores of my entire belief structure. Hope, in some ways, is also a belief structure. It's this idea that is beyond logic. It's beyond tangible things. It's very much ingrained in your upbringing and the way that you justify certain things and the way that you cope through difficult times, because it's tied to faith. It's a blind thing that you have to have. Karma is very similar, and it's like a law of the universe that can't be proven in any way, but it's this thing that you just have faith in. And so in that sense, they are very, very similar kinds of ideas. I would argue that karma can be a bit more on the vengeful side if you're in that mood.
Correct. Which is how I'm using it.
Right.
It is interesting. Karma is not like a Christian thing. This is going to be so fun to deep dive this.
We are deep diving this. I'm so excited.
We are deep diving this. But I'm going to compare it to hope in a religious way. So it's still relevant to this current conversation. But hope is very religious. Yeah. I think probably across religions, like immediately, I had to look it up. Sorry to my Christian school teachers. I didn't remember this verse exactly. So I looked up a verse, but there is a verse that says faith is being sure of what we hope for. So like the core tenet of Christian faith is saying like this is being sure of what we hope for. Like hope is so key. And it's like a really commonly quoted verse that a lot of people will say like is pretty centered to it. And I think hope kind of spans religions for the most part.
I actually now I really want to like look that up, because I actually do associate hope more with Christianity and maybe like the Judeo-Christian religions. I don't actually think hope is super native to like Hinduism, which is where karma originates. I think karma is like the version of hope in many ways, because there is this sense of, I don't want to say predeterminism, because that's false. The religion is not that things are predetermined, but I think there is much more a sense of you're not totally in control of your destiny. There's other things at play beyond just what humans are capable of. And I'm probably being very reductive, so I don't like quote me, but I'm now very curious to understand how that might translate.
Yeah, it's almost like, and we are getting so off track, so we can wrap this up soon, that like the faith is very core to like Judeo-Christian, like having that faith, and karma is core to, you know, your faith. But for both of those, hope feeds into those.
Right. Or it's like
It's
the same
almost
idea.
like, you know, the obvious religious metaphor is like, you know, product marketing. We support all, you know, revenue operations. Hope supports all different faith and beliefs.
I was sitting here like, what does Judaism think about hope? I don't really know. My Hebrew name is Yafa Tikva. Tikva means hope. Hope is literally my Hebrew name.
Like, I don't think it's ever come up in my entire life.
Yeah, well, because I'm like Googling it, they're like, hope is central to Judaism. The Hebrew word is Tikva. I was like, all right, that's my name.
To your point, Jen, though, like, when we think about just cross religion, like if we removed the name of the religion, I do think that religion as a whole kind of serves a purpose, and that is to give people hope. So I think it could be, I think I get what you're saying in that terms, where it's like, it doesn't matter what the religion is, but religion itself kind of fills that desire for hope. But when things are not looking good or when things are bad, you believe in something because you have hope, and sometimes that's because you have some sort of faith.
Yeah, and there's the hope that there's a reason for this, or there's something greater than this, or something will come out of this. So it's something you can comfort yourself with, that hope in those moments of darkness.
Yeah. And so in that sense, I mean, yes, both of these songs and poem, like the song and poem, are thematically talking about the same thing. And I think she has got to know that, you know, like, I am so curious. I'm like, ooh, I wonder what was going through her brain when she did this. But the structure of the talking about the metaphors is so similar. Like, a part of me is like, that had to have just been a voice in her head. But even if it wasn't, the similarity is definitely more to unpack there.
So much to unpack. In fact, we will do it next week. Join us next week on AP Taylor Swift when we deep dive Karma. That's all we have for you today on AP Taylor Swift. Be sure to rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on your social channel of choice at AP Taylor Swift to stay up to date. And join us next time as we overanalyze and deep dive into the next Taylor Swift song on AP Taylor Swift.